This program is presented by University of California Television. Like what you learn? Visit our website or follow us on Facebook and Twitter to keep up with the latest UCTV programs.
I want to welcome everyone. It's fantastic to see such a good crowd tonight. I think this is going to be a great event. It's been a great week at the Graduate School of Management. So welcome to all of you, alumni, guests, friends, business partners, and lots of folks from all around campus, which is great to see. I want to thank you for coming, and this is our first Graduate School of Management Dean's Distinguished Speaker event of this academic year, and I think we will have a great night. I want to, first of all, acknowledge our co-sponsors of this event who are really critical in getting our speaker here and helping host tonight. The first is the UC Davis World Food Center. They were very helpful in getting the word out and co-sponsoring with us. Unfortunately, Josette Lewis, the Associate Director, really wanted to be here, and I hear she is stuck in some serious traffic, but we want to thank her and acknowledge the World Food Center. Also, very important, our partners who are close to us, the Institute for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, funded, of course, by Mike and Renee Child, and represented tonight by Cleve Justice and Andy Hargadon, who are both here. So thank you for partnering and bringing our speaker tonight. And finally, I also want to acknowledge we have a number of representatives of some of our business partners of the Graduate School of Management who are here. I want to thank you for your support and for coming tonight as well. Bellamy Inc., Lamplighter Financial, River City Bank, SMUD, and Wells Fargo are all represented, and we thank you. So time actually flies. About a year ago was the first Dean's Distinguished Speaker that I was fortunate to host here shortly after I arrived at the school. And just to give a quick update on what has happened the past year, in case you've lost track, we've had a great year at the Graduate School of Management. We've developed and submitted proposals for a new undergraduate program as well as for a master's in business analytics program that we're excited about. A few months ago, we graduated our largest class ever of MBA and impact students. We quickly replaced them with a new class of incredibly interesting and talented students with high expectations for those. Some of the team who's helping us out tonight were instrumental over the summer in revamping and launching our new website, so our public face has a little bit of a new look. Hopefully you've all checked that out. And relevant, to tonight's presentation, I mentioned this has been a big week and lots going on at the school that's relevant to tonight. So first, one of our partners, as I mentioned, the Child Family Institute for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, has again this year launched their Big Bang competition and has started their series of academies and workshops to help train scientists, innovators of all types to take their ideas and turn them into serious business plans and turn them into reality. And so that's been very exciting. We were talking over dinner that the interest on this campus in the intersection of innovation and food is truly amazing. And at last year's Big Bang competition, at least 2 of the top 3 or 4 winners were in food or products around food innovation. And so there's a great history here. Our partnership with both Mars Inc. and HM Close, both in the ag and food industry, are other examples. And so it's a good environment to host tonight's talk. Also relevant to tonight's talk, many of you hopefully know that a couple of days ago we released what has become an annual study of the California Women Business Leaders. This is really a census of public companies in the state of California, where we take a snapshot each year and summarize how many women are leading these companies. It can be a sort of good news, bad news type of report. The number of female CEOs among these companies in California rose by a large percentage over the past year, but that was going from 14 female CEOs among these large companies to 17. So a 21% increase, but it's still only 17, and so there's much more work to do. These 17 female CEOs represent about 4% of the 400 CEOs of the companies in the study. So it's a very good week to be thinking about and reminding ourselves of the importance of diversity in corporate leadership. And that really brings us to tonight's special guest. These kind of dismal numbers make it a real pleasure to welcome a great female entrepreneur and innovator who has started a highly successful company and is really making some important changes in the food sector. I'll say just a little bit about our guest. We're very pleased, as you know, to have the co-founder and chief impact officer of Revolution Foods, Kirsten Saenz Tobey, who will speak to us tonight. Revolution Foods, I'm sure she will tell you a little bit more, but it started with the idea of transforming the way Americans and American kids eat and providing access to healthy and affordable meals. They started out exclusively in schools, serving kids, and now has grown to include retail products as well, and offer meal options for families and kids all around the country. They started out, we were talking over dinner about the early days where Kirsten and her co-founder would get into the kitchen at 3 a.m. to make the 500 meals to serve the schools they started with. It's now approximately 150 million meals down the road. The company has been incredibly successful with substantial and sustained growth. They now have more than $100 million in annual revenues and serve more than 1.5 million healthy meals every week to kids across 25 U.S. cities. So Kirsten Tobey stewards the company's mission and branding and really drives the vision for the company, and she'll share some of her insights with us tonight. I don't want to put any pressure on the MBA students in the crowd, but this company and the idea was started when she herself was in business school. So what you do today can have very important and long-lasting implications. Many honors have been given to both our guests and the company. Revolution Foods was named by Fast Company as one of the world's 50 most innovative companies just this year. Kirsten and her co-founder, Kristen Gruss-Richmond, were named by the Schwab Foundation and World Economics Forum as Social Entrepreneurs of the Year in 2015, and also were co-named Entrepreneur of the Year by the New Schools Venture Fund and noticed in Time Magazine among the education activists of 2011, as well as listed in Fortune's 40 Under 40 in 2013. I could go on and on about the company and about Kirsten, but I think it's better that I let her tell the story. And so I'm really honored to welcome and turn over the microphone to Kirsten Saenz Tobey.
Good evening. Here, I'm going to try to turn this microphone on. Can you hear me now? Okay. I'm going to actually start with a little video clip to get you guys warmed up to the story of Revolution Foods.
This is the start of my day. I want a good one. I eat. I study. I play. I create and I dream. Give me a mountain to climb. Give me the impossible. Give me a world to change. and I'll do it. Give me a choice and I'll be smart about it. Because it's me. I would choose the best things for me.
I'd choose to fill my day with positive things,
Healthy things.
natural things.
I'd start it with food and end it with food. To me, better food means a better mind and body.
Give me real food.
No funny stuff. Nothing artificial. Give me something good, really good, with an extra portion of yum and a side of respect.
Maybe 2.
This is the start of my life, and I want a good one.
Okay, let me see if I can get these slides up now. I forget what the shortcut was, but I will go into old school, full screen mode. Okay, so thank you for having me here this evening, and thanks for listening to the story, a little bit about Revolution Foods and sort of how we got to where we are and some of the values that actually drive our business model. So like Ann said, we started in 2006. My business partner Kirsten and I were MBA students at the time at Haas, just down the street. And we came together, we actually met in business school, and we came together because the two of us personally shared a sort of a set of common values, and those values have actually become what underpins everything that we do at Revolution Foods as a company. So values and core beliefs. We believed that healthy, nutritious food and healthy eating habits were an important lever for setting kids up for success in life. We believed that all kids deserve access to healthy food no matter where they live, no matter where they're born, no matter what their socioeconomic status, no matter what their color of their skin. And we believe that health is a key driver to really make change in the world, and that if kids are healthy, they can pursue their dreams, and they can not be distracted and interrupted by health problems due to poor nutrition. So we're still driven by those same beliefs, and we now have a team of people working with us at Revolution Foods that really believe strongly in those core beliefs. We started out with just the two of us and a business plan. We raised financing. We've built the team and gotten to where we are today. But as I was trying to think about sort of how to frame the discussion today, I was trying to think about how to talk about what the sort of ingredients of our business model are. How many people have seen this movie? Okay, enough that you know at least who this is. So what movie is this? Inside Out. So the interesting thing about Inside Out, I'm a mom, I have 3 little kids, so this is the kind of movie that I watch these days. It's actually a pretty good movie if you haven't seen it. But the premise of this movie is that there are these 5 emotions within each of us that are driving us to do different things and driving us to learn and grow in different ways, and driving us to overcome challenges in different ways. And so, inside each of us, we have fear and anger and sadness and disgust, but the whole personality is driven by joy, and joy is sort of the leader of the pack and inside of each of us, and that's kind of the premise of the movie. So I know some of those things sound like negative emotions. Who here loves to be sad? Not many people, but sadness is an important part of our personality and of overcoming obstacles in life. So when I thought about our business, we actually have a sort of a similar dynamic where we have 5 core elements in our business that are driving our business and that are helping us to overcome challenges and make an impact in the world. So in business, I think a mission-driven business model, which is the kind of model that we're trying to pioneer, you really have these 5 core ingredients that all have to work together in order to deliver the value and the values that we try to espouse every day. So those 5 ingredients are our business model, our financing structure, our product, our people, and they're all driven by our values and all underpinned by our values. And so, values really are in the driver's seat of the business. So I'll go a little bit into kind of what each of these mean for us. So business model, for us, a business model in a mission-driven business, and if you're thinking about starting a mission-driven business, you have to figure out what business model what's the structure of your company going to be? Are you going to be a nonprofit? Are you going to be a for-profit? When we were starting out, those were the two options there. Now you can be a benefit corporation, or you can be a certified B Corp, you can be a flexible purpose corporation. There's all different kinds of structures that you can take on in order to create a mission-driven business. For us, we chose to be a for-profit mission-driven business, and we're actually a certified B Corp also. We actually spent quite a bit of time while we were in business school debating whether we should be a nonprofit or a for-profit, and what the pros and cons of those different structures would be. What we did was we looked out at kind of what was going on in the space of kids and food and health and nutrition, and we found that there was a lot going on in the philanthropic space. There were a lot of philanthropists that were giving millions of dollars to school districts to plant gardens and do nutrition education. What we found in those kinds of approaches, though, was that there wasn't a lot of scalability to that model. You can find great philanthropists who can pour a ton of money into one school district, build a beautiful garden, but that's not going to impact the kids in the inner city urban district next door, or in the 50,000 other schools across the country. We also saw that many food companies were really cleaning up their supply chains, and still are. There's a lot of innovation going on in food companies, retail and retail stores, as well as food manufacturers, and especially when we were starting 10 years ago, Whole Foods was really growing and pioneering this clean supply chain and clean food, clean eating movement. But when we looked at that, we realized there was not really a lot of focus on affordability in that model. That was this sort of part of the food system that was really catering to the the wealthiest of the wealthy who could afford to eat a clean organic diet. We also saw a lot of great work happening in education, and we looked at should we just be sort of consultants to educators and help them to do better, create better food within their schools, and kind of work within the education space. But the more we talked to school leaders, we spent a lot of time while we were in business school talking to school leaders, the more we heard from them, we just need somebody to make fresh food and bring it to our back door. We don't want to be managing a restaurant on site. I became a principal because I believe in, I'm really good at managing teachers and curriculum and kids and parents and education. I'm not here to manage a restaurant. So we realized that, in order for us to accomplish that goal of creating access to fresh, healthy food, especially for communities in low-income communities and communities where the majority of kids qualify for free lunch at school, we realized that we had to actually make the food and deliver it to schools, and that became a really key part of our business model. So we kind of honed in on that as our business model, and we thought we could do this by creating a for-profit business and by financing it as a for-profit business. Because we actually talked to a lot of philanthropists who looked at us as two MBA students with a 10-page PowerPoint presentation and a small pilot program going in a charter school in downtown Oakland, and they said, well, call us back in 3 years and then we'll give you a donation. They weren't willing to take a risk on what we were doing, but we did find investors in the sort of mission-driven venture capital investment world and angel investors who were willing to take a leap and take a risk in investing in our model. So the next kind of stage was we had to figure out what was our product going to be, and what was our product going to stand for, and what was our product going to cost, and how are we going to get it out to kids and families. We talked a lot with, like I said in the early days, we talked a lot with cafeteria managers, food service directors, principals, parents, kids, and we just heard so often that food service directors were trying to make the best food that they could, but they didn't have the supply chain that they wanted to. The supply chain just wasn't set up for them to make fresh food, and they didn't have the cost structure to make fresh food every day in their cafeterias. So we started building out a commercial kitchen ourselves and said, well, what if we aggregate the demand from all of these schools that we're talking to, and we create a central kitchen where we can make fresh food and deliver it to schools every day. And that became sort of the way that our school meals were produced, and it became what worked the best for the schools that we were working with, who didn't have kitchen infrastructure, who didn't have the ability to either manage a cook to cook on site, or to have all the equipment needed to prepare fresh food on site. So we started building this platform of delicious, affordable, healthy, fresh food delivered every day to schools. And this platform of, we did breakfast, we do, or we still do, breakfast, lunch, after school snack, after school supper is now a program that's a federally subsidized program. And as we did this, we were kind of building this platform for innovation that allowed us, and building a clean supply chain that allowed us to then, take some of those same products and some of those same ingredients and package them into retail products and get them onto retail shelves so that we could distribute our high quality food into places where we weren't already in the school systems. That enabled us to reach our, to pursue our goal of scalability even faster. We built out our first kitchen. That was, we retrofitted an old McDonald's building in Alameda. That was our first sort of, our own kitchen that we built out. And we built a small team. We raised the funding that we needed to get the kitchen built out, and we began delivering 500 meals a day in that first year in 2006 to about 4 schools in Oakland. And then, by the end of that year, we had more schools calling us and, asking if we could work with them. By the end of that year, we were working with 10 schools and serving 1,000 meals a day, still getting up at 3 a.m. every day and getting the food out the door. And we then replicated that model and scaled it into other regions, and we're now serving 1.5 million meals a week to schools across the country. So we have 7 of those culinary centers around the country now, servicing about 25 cities and probably about 1,500 school sites. And our retail products are now sold in 3,000 stores, Safeway and some Whole Foods and Walmart and a variety of stores across the country. So our product was a really important focus area for us, and still is. We spend probably, the majority of our time developing our product, making sure that our supply chain is set up to produce the product and get it out to kids. Financing is a really important and critical element of building a mission-driven business. Investors are, investors don't just bring money, they bring expertise, they bring network, they bring, a set of values themselves. And so one of the most important things that we did as we were, building the model and figuring out what kind of financing we were going to bring in is we wanted each investor who came into Revolution Foods to be a person who espoused the values of our company. And I don't say that, that sounds like, well, doesn't everybody like healthy food for kids? That's like a really easy thing to like. But we spend a lot of time, we've raised now several rounds of financing to build the company to where we have today. And we've talked to a lot of different investors, and we've brought the investors into the company who believe in the mission of what we do, who believe in the business model that we have created. Because there are different ways we could be doing this, but they need to really kind of buy into the model that we have developed, and who can bring some expertise to the table. So we have really focused on building out our investor group and our board in a way that is consistent with the values of the company and that helps to push the mission and values forward. So that's meant that we're not just bringing venture capitalists into the mix as investors. We've brought foundations in as equity investors in the company. The Kellogg Foundation is an equity investor in Revolution Foods, and a couple of other foundations, family foundations. And that's not through a grant. That's an equity investment in the company. So we've tried to really pioneer an interesting and innovative social mission-driven financing model that keeps the values of the company consistent with the governance of the company and with the way that the board is structured and the way that the investment group is structured. So we have angel investors, we have high net worth family offices invested in Revolution Foods. These kinds of investors are tend to be more interested in a longer term investment than some typical sort of venture capital type investors. But most importantly, we've brought the investment in that we've needed to scale as quickly as we can, because scalability has been a really sort of foundational and fundamental value of what we're trying to do. We want to not just impact a few kids in one city, we want to impact kids and families across the country. So this focus on scalability and replicability has necessitated us raising a lot of financing. We've now raised $130 million to build out our culinary centers, build our team. And this scaling up has not always been easy. We've had a lot of challenges along the way. When we first scaled out to outside of California. Our first jump outside of California was to Washington, D.C. So we took, this fresh food production model that we had developed in California, and we plunked it down in Washington, D.C., and didn't quite plan well enough for how that expansion was going to work. We didn't quite think about how long the plane flight was between California and D.C. and how many times we would have to be going there in order to train the team we had built there and to make sure that the facility was set up correctly. And it was that expansion to D.C. was probably one of the hardest times of our company history. But it also was one of the moments that brought our team together, because both investors that were sort of like, how are they going to do this, saw us work through these challenges and build a team that could really function in DC. But we also, I think probably more than anything, what we proved was that we as a California company could be relevant to a totally different region of the country, a totally different demographic of the country, and that enabled us to then expand across the East Coast. Because if we had just sort of marched across the country from west to east, we would have been sort of defined as a California company that didn't understand and didn't know how how kids on the East Coast would respond, and what kind of food families were looking for on the East Coast. So I think our unique financing structure is really one of the things that has enabled us to now, to get to the point where we now have served 175 million meals to kids and families across the country. But perhaps one of the most important investors in our team, in our company, is our team. So every person who works for us for at least a year, it becomes a stockholder in the company, and that's been so people are really one of the make or break factors of a company, of any company, but in particular in a mission-driven company, people are absolutely critical. And people are not just our team, our employees, it's our supply chain partners, it's our investors, it's our school partners, our board members, our advisors. Anyone who interacts with the company is an important person to us, and our team, our shareholders, our investors are really help to drive our success every day. One of the interesting things about this fellow who you see the picture of, he was one of the original people who joined our team in Washington, D.C. when we first expanded. He actually came on as a temp because we had not hired enough people to run the operation in DC when we first got there. So Luis and a group of about 6 or 7 other people came on through this temp agency, and they all just showed up kind of ready to work, and we said, okay, here's what you need to do. You need to count this and get this over there. He's still with us today, 7 years later, and he's and he was just with me in the Senate building, in the U.S. Senate building, serving lunch to U.S. senators a couple weeks ago in D.C. And coming from being this sort of temp who barely spoke a word of English, he's now managing an entire team of culinarians in our culinary center, and that entire team of 7 temps who joined us got through that first challenging couple of months in our DC launch, and they are now the leadership team of our Washington DC culinary center. So I think if you ask almost anyone on our team, whether it's an investor, an employee, why they're working for Revolution Foods, I would guess that they will tell you, I'm doing it for the kids. The values and the mission of what we do is what drives people to come to work every day. It's what drives investors to show up and re-up their investment when we need more financing. Many of our employees actually are family members of kids in the schools that we serve, and so they're also there because they believe that their kids deserve the best food that they can have access to. So it's just been so critical to us to build a team of people in all different areas of partnership for our company who are completely committed to the mission and the kids. I also will say that our people and our team have probably taught Kirsten and me more than almost anyone else in the 10 years that we've been building this company. We are, one of the things somebody has called us from time to time is we are relentless learners. And that's probably one of the biggest compliments that anyone can ever give us, is that we are constantly listening, constantly asking questions, and constantly trying to learn from the people, inside the company and outside the company who know, frankly, more about this, this area than we do. So last but not least is our values. And I think this is, I've tried to talk about this a little bit, but our values really are, like in the Inside Out movie, in the driver's seat of the company. And they're it's at the end of the day, when there are sort of differences between what the different components of the business need, it's our values that bring us together and help us make decisions and help us move forward, and help us to really create the impact that we want to have. Those core values that Kirsten and I came together around still resonate with everyone in our company today, whether it's a dishwasher, a truck driver, an investor, our CFO. They will tell you that the values of the company around bringing healthy, high-quality food to families across the country are what drives them and what drives the success of the business. We've translated those values into very specific sort of drivers of our business. We have our food values that drive our culinary team and our supply chain team, what's in and what's out, what we allow in our food, what we don't allow in our food. We have a very strict set of sort of ingredient standards and nutrition standards that underpin this sort of general value around good nutrition. We have cultural values, so every person in our company is trained around the core values that we operate under as a team and as a company. We also have our values around really creating a sustainable business. And I mean a financially sustainable business. We are a for-profit, social mission-driven business, and we always say, no margin, no mission. If we aren't operating and delivering excellence in our financial results, we're not able to have the impact that we want to have on kids and families every day. So we have a value around financial sustainability, making sure that cost controls are in place, making sure waste controls are in place, making sure that every person understands the financial model of the business, so that we're able to, because every team member is an owner, we're able to deliver the results that that we need to deliver in order to have the impact that we want to have. So at the end of the day, these values really were what has allowed us to take advantage of what we see as a real market opportunity for creating change and creating impact in kids and with kids and families. And still today, over 75% of the kids in schools that eat our school meals every day qualify for free lunch. So we're serving a majority low-income population where most of the kids that we're serving don't have reliable meals coming onto their home tables at breakfast, at dinner, and on the weekends. So for many of the kids that we serve, we're serving them their breakfast, their lunch, and even a supper before they go home from before the end of the day at school. So ultimately, the values are our driver, allowing our growth as a company to be our impact. So that's something that everyone in our company is on board with, that we are growing fast. It's not always easy to grow fast, but we're growing fast because we want to have an impact on kids. We're also aligning the profitability and the margin structure of our company with our mission, so that we, in order to grow and have the impact that we have, excuse me, we have to have a financially sustainable business model. And at the end of the day, for our team, for our investors, and for the market, the values that we have built within this company and the values that drive the company are our value for investors and for our team at the end of the day. So that's our values are our value is something that we've really tried to make sure that every person on our team and every person in our investment group understands, because it's a critical part of our business model, and it's what is fueling our ability to have a positive impact on kids and families across America. So I will stop there and see if I know that there are some questions in the audience, so I will maybe pause and see what questions are out there. Yes.
Hi, I'm Grace. I think you said, I'm Grace. I'm a first-year MBA student. I think you successful entrepreneur journey set us a very great example to follow. My question is that, what's the cutting-edge competitiveness of the Revolution Foods over your major competitors, and draw a lot of attention from the venture capital investors?
So it's interesting. So our sort of competitive advantage, I think, is that we have entered a space that is really difficult to execute in. We're we're making fresh food, we're delivering it to schools, we're in a very heavily regulated industry, school meals. There's a huge federal program that's auditing schools on a daily basis. And the fact that we've been able to do that at a scale and at a level of affordability is, I think our execution has actually been a competitive advantage. The fact that we've just been able to do it. When you look at sort of the competitive, who else is doing what we're doing, there's nobody else that's doing what we're doing at a national scale. And it makes me really sad to say that. I wish we had more competition, frankly, because I think, kids would be much better off if there were more options for fresh food in schools. And there aren't. There are heavily processed frozen food options for schools. There are schools, much wealthier schools can afford to sort of do on-site, food preparation. But if you're a low-income urban school district, you don't have money to do that kind of thing. And so, the fact that we've been able to, build and execute on this model, frankly, has been our competitive advantage.
Hi, Kirsten.
Oh, hi.
Hi, Kirsten. I really admire your vision, which drives the company to be successful for 10 years. Just wondering, where do you see your company and the food industry heading to for the next 10 years? Thank you.
That's a really good question. I think the food industry is changing a lot right now, and there is a lot going on in food innovation and entrepreneurship. I mean, I sort of am afraid to say it, but I think we're in a little bit of a bubble with regard to venture capital investment in food, and so it's hard to say. It's like when you're in a bubble, it's hard to say what's gonna survive the bubble bursting. I do believe that the way that we access food is going to be fundamentally different 10 years from now than it is today. Like, I don't think we're going to be pushing grocery carts up and down the aisles of big grocery stores anymore. We may be, but I think there's so much going on with food delivery. I don't know how sustainable the model of home delivery of food actually is. Right now, it's all completely financed by venture capital, and we'll see kind of what shakes out at the end of the day with regard to sustainable business models. I know, like, my own personal shopping habits have changed dramatically over the last year since Amazon Fresh came to my neighborhood. And so, there's nothing more convenient than ordering milk at 10 p.m. at night and having it show up on your doorstep at before 7 a.m. the next morning. And that couldn't happen 2 years ago. So it's hard to imagine what's going to happen 10 years from now and what's going to change. But I think I think a lot of the way that we access food is going to change. I don't think all of the companies that are out there delivering food to people's homes are going to survive, though.
Thanks very much. I'm very interested in sort of the space you were describing, this developing nexus in between for-profit and nonprofit organizations. And so specifically, I'd be interested to know, what were the benefits that you saw in being a certified B Corp? Why did you go through the process of achieving that?
It's a good question. So the B Lab actually started the same year that we did. So it's a very new certification, and Benefit Corporation is an even newer sort of corporate structure that's evolved or that's emerged. It hasn't evolved. We decided to become a certified B Corp. I mean, very honestly, we were like, well, that sounds cool. Like third-party certification of our social mission. Like, great, let's do it. And we got discounts on using Salesforce.com by doing it. So like there were some very like tangible reasons that we did it. It's, I think now that we're in consumer products, and now that we have a product that's on shelves in grocery stores, it's starting to become more recognized by consumers as a, oh, I believe, this is sort of a stamp of approval that I can support this brand. I don't think it's ubiquitous yet, though. Like, I don't think every consumer who sees the little bee with the circle around it knows what that means, or is going to go Google it and understand what it means. So for us, it's been in some ways we don't have our own. It's enabled us not to have to create all of our own metrics around all of the sort of social metrics and social impact metrics. It's a ready set of metrics that then can be compared to other companies and that sort of thing. And it's I just believe in the movement, and so I personally have said, like, we're gonna be a B Corp as long as we can, and we're gonna try to become a benefit corporation. We're gonna try to reincorporate as a benefit corporation if we can get our investors on board with it. And we actually have investors that are very on board with the idea of it, but there are very few companies of our size or companies who have considered, entering the public market that are benefit corporations. And so the only reason I can envision that our investors wouldn't want to go for it is that they wouldn't want to be the first. So I think it's another like very changing and evolving area of business, and one that's really exciting. I think if any of you are thinking of starting a company, I would highly recommend incorporating from the get-go as a benefit corporation if you can, because making the change is a lot harder once you're at a reasonable size and scale.
Hi, thank you. And just curious as to, I love the value equals values. And so in looking at the healthy meals and really engaging with kids in your entree video, is what are you doing to link to the nutrition education and to really making the healthy foods, the choice of foods that kids are eating and bringing home, so doing the education and linkage to families?
That's a really great question. So we do a lot of nutrition education through partnerships with nonprofit organizations, because one thing that we have realized, and it's unfortunate, but schools don't pay for nutrition education. Right now, nutrition education is almost entirely funded by philanthropy. So right now, as far as I can tell, there's not a sort of for-profit business model in nutrition education. So what we do is we partner with nonprofits who can bring the philanthropic funding in to deliver nutrition education programs, whether that's cooking programs or garden programs. It kind of depends on what resources the school has, because schools have to support nutrition education through their own teachers or their own administration also. So we have a number of different partnerships with, Cooking Matters, which is a Share Our Strength program, with Common Threads, which does an after-school cooking program, with Recipe for Success, which does teacher training around garden education. So, and we actually have great relationships with foundations, and so we'll sometimes try to help do some matchmaking around getting a foundation to give a grant to a specific school to bring a nutrition education program in where we're operating. So we do it through sort of philanthropic partnerships at this point. But it's critical. It's a really important piece of building healthy eating habits, is actually doing the education. We also believe that a lot of the work that we do just around exposing kids to new foods and healthier foods and fresh fruits and vegetables every day is educational in and of itself. And our goal has always been to make our program just even on its own in the school cafeteria to make it educational.
So messaging and packaging though tied to those take-home recipes are simple things that can be part of what you do.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I'm the only dietitian in the crowd, and I have a technical non-business question. So to meet the USDA guidelines, do you do it by servings, or do you do a third of the RDA? And who does your analysis? How do you get that done? And then my other question is, how do you meet the needs of children, let's say, who have diabetes, PKU? I'm a dietitian who specializes in inborn errors of metabolism.
Yeah, so we have a team of 7 dietitians on staff who do all of our auditing and compliance work, as well as our product development work. So all of our school meals have to comply with the National School Lunch Program guidelines, which are very strict, and they're tied to the dietary guidelines for Americans, but they're very specific and prescriptive in food-based menu planning. So because we have to operate within the National School Lunch Program compliance environment, we do all of our compliance with National School Lunch Program guidelines. On top of that, we have our own set of nutrition and preparation standards. So all of our fruits and vegetables are fresh, or in the case of vegetables, we do some frozen vegetables. We limit the amount of sugar in the foods that we either manufacture ourselves or work with our supply chain on. Areas that are not regulated under the National School Lunch Program, we sort of have above and beyond guidelines. We also have an ingredient guideline around some of the artificial colors and flavors and things like that we don't allow into our food. So we ensure kind of a clean supply chain coming in addition to the nutrition guidelines. You had a second part of your question, which was, Oh, special needs for special dietary needs. So we, under the National School Lunch Program, we're required to accommodate any child who has a medically diagnosed special dietary need. So we provide documentation if it's needed, or we provide special meals if they're required.
So hi, Kirsten. I really enjoy how you talk about your mission has to be driven by the margin. But as a food scientist myself, working for large food industry, I know exactly how hard it is to really deliver the good quality food, clean supply chain. It comes with a cost. So how do you control the cost by still having a margin with your company at a scalable amount?
Yeah. Well, cost control takes up a lot of our team's time, and cost control comes from the very beginning. We do cost-based design, so we say, we have this amount of money to design this meal in, and it's like an Iron Chef competition. Here's the amount of money you have. Here are the ingredients you can work with. Go play. And I mean, I say that jokingly, but it is kind of that's sort of what our culinary team has to work with. And they have to work within all the guidelines that we have, the nutrition guidelines, the federal guidelines, and the ingredient guidelines. So it's a tough puzzle to solve. But I think when we set out with all of our guidelines and our values in place, then we have that box to work within to develop our food. We also are very careful with waste control, so we have incredibly low levels of waste in our production and we've designed our model. And schools sometimes don't like this, but we require them to place their orders with us a week ahead of time. So so we can then place our orders with our supply chain partners to bring the ingredients in, so that we're not over ordering or under ordering, which helps with cost control. And then we just it's a lot of training of our team, so that there is really careful attention to making the meals according to the guidelines that we set out. And it's certainly not easy, but it's a fun, creative challenge for our chefs to make great tasting meals that meet within that kind of, as long as we give them that box to play within, it actually is easier to play within that box than to sort of start over here and say, oh, wouldn't it be great to make this meal? And then, oh my gosh, look at the cost of all those ingredients. It's not gonna, and then try to fit it into the box. So we give them the box first, and then we can play within that.
Hi, my name's Kirsten Swanson, and I'm a part-time student in the Sacramento MBA program. I had a question, kind of building off the supply chain. Here in Sacramento, farm to fork is really important to the region, and I was curious, because California is blessed with an agricultural diversity. As your business continues to expand outward outside of California, does that become a risk? And if you could kind of talk around how sourcing really is implemented in your business model.
Yeah, so California is probably 20% of our business at this point, and then we serve a lot of schools in Texas, Colorado, DC, New Jersey, New York, Boston. So we're in a lot of areas that aren't quite as lucky as California agriculturally. And so we've built our supply chain accordingly, and that means we can't have everything be fresh and local all the time. You just can't. It's very difficult if you're living in Boston to eat fresh and local in the middle of winter. And so, I mean, you probably could do it, but it would be. But one of the debates that we have had actually is that Washington D.C., the city of Washington D.C. has a local foods requirement in their school meals. And so there's a certain percentage of food that's served in schools that's required to be locally sourced. And so we have debates with the regulatory authorities there around whether it's better to serve a kid locally made applesauce or a fresh apple that's not local, that's not locally sourced. Because under the local sourcing guidelines, you should serve the applesauce. But nutritionally, and we could ask the dietitians in the room, it's better for you to eat the fresh apple. And so, there are places where, we have to kind of navigate those requirements and figuring out which value do you want to put on top, right? Do you want to put the nutrition value on top or the local economy value on top? And, they're not easy questions to answer, but we have really tried to, build a supply chain that can support national expansion.
Have you been able to quantify how much better the students who eat your food do versus those who don't?
That's a good question. So I was saying over dinner, one of the things I think we have not done a good job of is collecting that kind of data over the years. We've been so focused on execution and getting food out the door every day that we haven't put any of our sort of financial investment into designing the right, sort of evaluation tools to really quantitatively measure that kind of question. What we do have is a lot of stories and anecdotes from school leaders and teachers and parents even who talk about what impacts they're seeing. And I was on a panel at a conference, superintendent's conference, or superintendents and school boards conference with the superintendent of San Francisco Unified, and I gave a little talk about Revolution Foods, and he gave a little talk about the San Francisco Unified partnership with Revolution Foods. And he put up this slide that was from his school survey data that showed that the kids who were eating, it was like kids who were getting A's, B's, C's, D's, and F's in school, in their middle school community, and basically correlating it to kids who were eating breakfast and fresh fruit every day through the Revolution Foods partnership. So, I mean, it's that kind of data. I mean, it's not like published data, but it's that kind of data from school surveys and principals and superintendents kind of pulling that. I mean, I'm sure you couldn't prove causation there, but proving that sort of correlation is there, that kids who are eating breakfast every day and kids who are eating fresh fruit every day are the same kids who are doing better on their tests. So we try to collect as many anecdotes like that as we can and testimonials, and I would love for us to get better about actually doing sort of pre and post surveys and doing more robust data collection.
Hey, so my kids only eat grilled cheese and quesadillas and pizza. So I'm curious though, I mean, do you have any trouble with kids adopting your food programs as you sort of wean them off the frozen pizza onto healthier foods? And how do you work with school districts to help the kids actually eat what's put in front of them?
Yeah, it's a good question. Over dinner, I was saying that there's been nothing more humbling than becoming a parent in this process. So I have 3 kids also, and they each have completely different eating habits. And they're all growing up in my household eating the same food, and one is a super picky eater. One eats anything that you put in front of her, or one eats anything but has a severe nut allergy, actually. And then the baby, the 18-month-old, eats absolutely everything that I put in front of her, including like spicy Chinese food. And so I don't know if I have a sort of like the answer for like what do you do with because my middle kid is just super picky and she eats a very limited amount of things, but I try to find those things and in Revolution Foods we really try to get school leaders to sort of take the pressure off of the healthy eating, sort of like shoving it down kids' throats, and just give them a lot of different options and give them a lot of different things to choose from. There's, most kids will eat fruit. There's a lot of different, there's many different kinds of fruit. Some kids like some kinds of fruit, some don't like other kinds of fruit. But, getting them to eat fruit, just, making changes in what's available to them in terms of, we make every sandwich or hamburger or, bunned meal that we serve comes on a whole grain bun. And so kids just can't get white bread in our system. Fruit is always fresh. So some of it is just about kind of making the healthy option the only one that's there, and hoping for the best. And the more kids are exposed to some of those new things, the more they're going to be likely to start trying them. One more question? Okay, last question. Where are the microphones? Oh, there's one over here. I saw a hand, yes.
I don't need a microphone, my voice projects. So you might have to retread some of what we went over in dinner, but you said your competitive advantage is largely based on your execution. Coming from food, executing on regulation is really hard. And do you trust your local groups to really try to stay ahead and kind of get a finger on the pulse of what is the state going to do, what is the regulatory system that we're working with going to do, or do you try to have sort of a centralized approach to that?
So when it comes to policy, We do that mostly centrally. We have our team of our nutrition team, and then I and a couple of other folks on the team sort of keep an eye on what's going on policy-wise. And we work in school food. It's mostly federally regulated, so it's kind of like you really just mostly have to keep an eye on what's happening in Washington. There are some state-level regulations that that are like tweaks this way and that way, but they don't change really fundamentally the overall school meal program. One of the nice things that we like to see is that some states actually have an additional reimbursement. So in California, schools get an additional, I think it's about 20 cents per meal to provide food to low-income kids, whereas most other states don't have any additional reimbursement. The other thing, if I had more sort of time and resources available, is that I think we would have a more concerted kind of policy-focused effort. But it's something that we just, with our current structure, we don't have a lot of resources to put towards that. But I think, if we could wave a magic wand and have more states that have more, reimbursement for low-income kids to get healthy, fresh food into their systems, that would be a great policy win at a local level. Yeah. I think we're done. Wow.
Yes, so that was fantastic. So keeping on the theme, we have a gift to thank you that is I believe, all products made by companies from GSM alumni.
Wow.
There's some beer, some nice crackers. So
lovely. Thank you so much.
So please join me in thanking you.
Thank you.